Which teams have no three-down linebackers to choose from for your IDP leagues? That and more this week on the IDP Roundtable. IDP Roundtable here with the guru, John Norton, and Guru, the eyes of the guru, the wonderful weekly column at footballguys.com, see no three-down linebackers for a lot of teams. What did we learn about this situation in week one?
It seems like we have a growing trend of teams with all the substitutions and situational waves of guys coming on and off the field. We have several teams this year right off the bat that have nobody playing on all three downs. We have the Steelers rotating three guys in there. Even Devin Bush only played about 77% of the snaps. I think Mark Barron was second. Vince Williams played a very low snap count. They were even putting some safeties up there in some nickel situations. So I got to believe that the Steelers will eventually move towards getting Bush on the field full time, but we're not there yet. The Titans, we kind of expected them to have a three-man rotation. They did have a somewhat of a three-man rotation, but it was not broke down evenly. We had Jayon Brown got the majority of the snaps, but none of the three guys, Wesley Woodyard or Rashaan Evans, were on the field full time. The Redskins, that situation, John Bostic led the charge with 88% of the snaps, and we had three guys rotating at the other position, none of them being Josh Harvey Clemens, who we went into the week wondering if he was going to be a full-time guy. He didn't even get on the field. The Lions had nobody playing three down from the inside. Their only three-down linebacker was on the outside, Devon Kennard. Spent a lot of his time as a pass rusher, as an edge rusher, so that almost doesn't really count as a linebacker. The Patriots, we've become accustomed to them kind of throwing us some curveballs, and they didn't even have Kyle Van Noy in the stadium this week. He was off. His wife was having a child, so he wasn't even there, and they still didn't have anybody play every down. The Raiders joined that mix as well. Vontaze Burfict played a little over 80% of the snaps, but they had nobody in a three-down role, and the one guy that a lot of us were kind of counting on, Tahir Whitehead, played just over 60% of the snaps. So it's becoming a trend, something we're going to need to keep an eye on, and we're going to wind up having to play some two-down guys that make a lot of tackles when they get on the field as the season progresses, I think.
The always changing landscape of IDP fantasy football. And one of the fun things about doing the show for so long is that tracking IDP fantasy football gives you an idea of trends in football, and you want to track trends. We're real excited to be joined every week this year on the IDP Roundtable by Matt Schauf from Draft Sharks, SCHAUFDS, and the IDP Hits, and so many other wonderful things. I've been seeing you around this fantasy football world for a while, Matt, and now we get to see each other here at the Roundtable. Speaking of linebackers, and I know some of this is going to dovetail with some of the stuff that John said, but again, week one, the big reveal, one of the first things we pay attention to is these linebacker situations and playing time clearing up. What else did we learn in week one?
Well, I mean, one thing I learned is that you're going to be looking at my face this time around as opposed to doing just audio. I had to, usually right around Wednesday of the regular season, I've got like the hockey playoff beard going.
Sure.
So I had to trim up today to be presentable.
I showered today.
So what we did learn about the linebacker snaps, a lot of the things that John already mentioned. Washington for me is a stay away situation. I'm not so worried about the Titans, where Jayon Brown played 90%. That was a level that he didn't get to a whole lot last year, and he produced for us pretty well there. But some other situations that did sort out. The Bengals, Nick Vigil was the leader at 91% there. Preston Brown played 77%. And then the next guy was Jermaine Pratt at 6%. I know we have Carl Lawson kind of in the mix along the lines of what Devon Kennard was doing, playing some linebacker, some on the edge. But it's pretty much going to be Vigil and Preston Brown. And I was wondering if we were going to get more Preston Brown on the field than we did last year. Maybe a bit more, but not enough to where I'm going to want to play him very often. So it looks like it's Nick Vigil and not really anybody else there for IDP purposes. The Chargers, a situation where we pretty much always get annoying playing time trends. This time we got 100% snaps from Thomas Davis, who all he does is stay on the field. He's like, everybody talks about Tom Brady, Drew Brees, Adam Vinatieri. This guy's 36, has had 3 ACL tears, and he's playing 100% snaps for a new team this year. He had 14 tackles against the Colts. So I believe in Thomas Davis until he gives me a reason not to. Kaiser White played 86%, so that's even a higher level than we usually get from Chargers linebackers. I'm going to wait and see what happens with him next week. I think the situation's probably still sorting out. Jatavis Brown was hurt. I don't think he's going to enter the lineup, but we'll see. Denzel Perriman was coming off an injury that had him questionable. He was active for the game. He played 1 snap on special teams. So, again, we'll see if anything changes in week 2, but I'm going with Thomas Davis. I'm interested in Kaiser White, and we'll see where things go beyond that. The Dolphins played things the way that we thought they were going to. It was Jerome Baker and Sam Iguavoen, 94% for Baker, 88% for, I'm going to say Sam because the last name's going to tie my tongue up. Neither of them put up big numbers in this game, but I think there's going to be plenty of opportunity. That defense is going to be on the field a lot. So I'm definitely interested in Baker. I'm curious to see the other dude, the unnamed one, who, by the way, is following the Jarrell Freeman path to the NFL at this point. When I don't think he started in the league the way Freeman did, but did go to the CFL, was a starter in the CFL, came back. Now he's a starter with the Dolphins. And in Baltimore, we entered the regular season. I was wondering if Chris Board was going to start next to Patrick Onwuaser and if we were going to get 2 guys playing more than halftime snaps. We're not, it looks like. Onwuaser played the whole game, or at least until late when the game was out of hand. Kenny Young was the guy who started next to him, though. Kenny Young played 42%. Chris Board played 26%. So just like last year with CJ Mosley, we've got 1 linebacker inside in Baltimore that we can use. Nobody else is really worth a look. And there weren't any big numbers in this game, but Miami barely kept the ball long enough to give anybody numbers. And then one more guy I'll mention in that section, Shaq Thompson, who is, of course, kind of the positive fallout from Thomas Davis leaving Carolina. Shaq Thompson played 97% for the Panthers against the Rams last Sunday. He's only reached that level 11 other times in his previous 4 seasons. He was a 100% playing time guy early last year, first 4 games. That was when Thomas Davis was suspended. Then as soon as Davis came back, he dropped right back to 50% to 65% range. So I think Thompson's going to be a full-time guy going forward this year. I don't see any reason why Shaq Thompson can't turn into at least like a linebacker 3 fringe player for us.
And I love the note on the ageless wonders. And Thomas Davis, there are just some people that were born to play football, really born to play football. That's that dude. And I like talking about the ageless wonders on the defensive side. We'll talk a little bit about Cameron Wake in a bit, but Guru, we got some more cleanup at linebacker, some playing time situations, some players up, some players down, just go all around at linebacker.
Yeah, the linebackers are kind of your focal point on your IDP side for the most part. They're kind of the running backs, so we spend a lot of time talking about those guys. A couple guys that Matt talked about, I've been very high on Kaiser White ever since, last year coming out of training camp. He actually won the starting weak side job and then got injured, and he's been in the middle all this year. I really don't see him coming out of that situation. Definitely like him, and I really was impressed with the way Shaq Thompson played, the different defensive scheme going with the 3-4. He seems to be a very good fit at that inside spot in the 3-4. Hassan Reddick is a guy that we were kind of on our watch list going into the season. Pretty much expect him to have a full-time role. I still believe that eventually he's going to have a full-time role. Did not have it in week 1, but we have to remember that he's coming off of a knee issue, had a little sore knee going into the season. That may have been a reason that he didn't get a full-time role in the first week. That could change over the course of the next few weeks as he gets completely healthy. The biggest surprise for me was Deion Jones, and we know he's also coming off an injury, but we fully expected him to be, when he gets on the field right away, to go right back into being that stellar LB1 type guy that he's been in the past. That didn't happen. Played 33 snaps total in the game. It was Devondre Campbell that wound up being the every down guy there in Atlanta this week. I expect that will eventually change once Jones gets completely healthy. Another situation we were kind of watching throughout the preseason, was in Indianapolis with Bobby Okereke and Anthony Walker. Walker did start, but we've another situation where we've got a timeshare. Walker played about 53% of the time. Okereke came on in a lot of the sub packages and supplanted him there, and they also shifted a extra safety in for a few plays there. So even between the two of them, they didn't play 100% of the time. But Okereke is a guy that I have a high expectations for in the long term. I'll be surprised if by the end of the season he's not in a very near full-time role.
So, Matt, let's go a little bit deeper, or I want to hear what else you would have to say about Deion Jones, because this was a player we were drafting as a linebacker 1, and certainly even looking at his impact on the Atlanta defense. Keanu Neal, another guy who came up small in week 1, welcoming back to the mix here. Give us some more insight on what you think's going on with Deion Jones.
Yeah, Deion Jones is a curious one because you look at the playing time, he played 62%, and you wonder if it's tied to them getting blown out. I don't think it was. I went back and watched that game back today, and it looked like they were giving him some rest, kind of along the lines of what the Rams were doing with Todd Gurley and Malcolm Brown, where there was a pretty large patch in the second quarter where it looked like Deion Jones was not on the field. There were a few spots here and there in the third quarter, and then it kind of later in the game, it looked like they were taking Deion Jones out for early downs, and they would throw him back in for some third down spots. He looked fine playing. I didn't see him limping off the field. I mean, I was watching the condensed version, so maybe they cut out the limping, but I didn't see where there were any physical issues with him. It seemed like they were just kind of easing him back into the lineup. I would assume that he's going to get back to a 100% time guy because he's always been a good coverage linebacker. It's not like they would have a reason besides that foot concern to limit his playing time. So, how long that's going to take, I don't know. I've been trying to look around for some kind of, explanation, somebody asking coaches why he didn't play more than that. I haven't found it yet. So I'll keep an eye out for that. But, until then, I think you probably treat Deion Jones as like a number 3 fantasy linebacker for week 2. And then let's hope that his playing time builds.
Speaking of answers, we're going to have some answers from the guru on the defensive line. And John, we can look at some players that are on the rise, some players that we're going to be patient with, and also some players that maybe we need to be aware, keep our head on a swivel, looking for more information going forward. Run down the defensive line for us.
All right, so the first thing that jumped out at me was Vic Beasley and Tack McKinley finally getting on the field virtually full time. You very rarely ever see a defensive end play every snap, so 90% of the snaps we're going to consider that full time for that position. These are guys that in the past they rarely played 60% of the time. They didn't put up any numbers that matched the number of snaps that they had in this particular game, but if they continue to see that much opportunity, I think the numbers are going to go up. They're both very good pass rushers. Never really been big on making a lot of tackles or a little on the small side, but I think the opportunity will go a long way for towards making them some quality pickups for us. Sam Hubbard, being a Bengals homer here, I get to watch the Bengals quite a bit, and I was high on this guy at the end of last season. I've been high on him all during the off season. Every article that I've written, I told you to get this guy, and you could get him late during draft season. Probably too late to get him late at this point. 2 sacks in the opener. I mean, the guy is the real deal. He's a 3-down linebacker. 3-down defensive end. He's going to be on the field all the time. He's going to be playing opposite Carlos Dunlap, and he's going to become a mainstay there. If you can still get him on your roster, that week 1 was not a fluke. Make that happen. Justin Houston making the change from being a outside linebacker in a 3-4 to a put his hand down in the dirt defensive end in a 4-3. There was some concern about him maybe not making that transition smoothly. I thought he looked outstanding in the first game. I played 80% of the snaps. Looked like he was natural with his hand down. It's not the first time he's ever done that. He did it in college, so it's not like he's never played hand down defensive ends. So it's not anything new to him. But if there was any concern about that going in, the only concern with him now is him being able to stay healthy, which has been an issue over the years. So as long as he can stay on the field, I think he's going to be very productive for us. We always have some guys every year that don't do anything the first week or 2 weeks, and everybody gets all antsy about them. I don't think I have to tell anybody not to cut J.J. Watt or Aaron Donald, but both of them were near goose eggs. I think they had 1 tackle between them in week 1. Those are guys that we know they're going to come around. Yes, Houston has some issues there with trying to figure things out. They lost Jadeveon Clowney. Whitney Merciless stepped up back into the same role he had in 2015 when he had 11 sacks. So I think that's going to take some pressure off of Watt, and Watt will definitely get it going here before too long. Olivier Vernon, going back to a defensive end in a 4-3, did very little in this game for the Browns, but this is a guy that has a history of starting slowly. It was a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, when he was played in at a defensive end spot in a 4-3, and he did like nothing for the first 3 or 4 games, and he ended up with, 50 tackles and 8 or 9 sacks on the season, something like that. So if you pick this guy up, hang on to him. He's in a great situation. He's got good talent around him. Guys are going to keep the offensive line honest in blocking schemes. He's going to get a lot of opportunity to have single blocking, and sooner or later he's going to start putting up some numbers for us. Red flag on Damon Harrison. Guys used to playing 70, 80, 90% of the snaps. They stuck him in a 3-man rotation. He played 27 snaps in the first game. Just not going to get enough opportunity. He actually didn't even lead the interior line in snaps. He was third on the interior line. So I'm not sure what's going on there, what the thought process is. But this is a guy that needs to be on the field. If they put him out there, he's going to make a lot of tackles for us. He's not going to give us a lot of sacks. He might have 2 or 3 sacks on the season, but this is a guy we can usually count on for at least 3 or 4 tackles pretty much every week. So this is a guy you're starting, especially in tackle required leagues. I would be a little concerned at this point, maybe start looking for some other options in case this does not change. Some guys, situations you might want to be aware of or beware of, however you want to look at it. Calais Campbell playing a lot of interior line in the first game. They've shifted him inside to tackle quite a bit so they can get Yannick Ngakoue and Josh Allen on the outside. Campbell's as a tackle producer as well as a pass rusher, but he's not going to be as productive as a pass rusher from the interior position. He'll still have 7 or 8 sacks by the end of the year from that spot, but I don't think we're going to see the double-digit sacks that we've seen out of him in the past. Shouldn't have a big impact on his tackle totals. I would still expect more than 40 tackles, but we're not going to get a whole lot of big plays out of him like we've seen. The Chiefs pass rush, and we were questioning when they got rid of all their edge rushers, and they brought in some guys. They brought in Frank Clark. He didn't really do much the first week. They had 1 sack in the first game, and this week they're going to be playing Oakland. Normally that would be a good opportunity to start your pass rushers, but this is not the same old Oakland Raiders. They basically shut down Chubb and Miller last week, held both of them without a sack. They only gave up 1 sack, I believe, to Denver as a team. So I would definitely be careful starting by pass rushers from Kansas City this week.
Let's stay on the sack beat, and let's go back over to Matt and go through the top sack artists of week 1. Some familiar names, some unfamiliar names. And again, I've got to give another shout out for Cameron Wake. I think he was AFC Defensive Player of the Week. So, I love the ageless wonders. I love these guys that their motor clearly is generated from not necessarily money or prestige. It's just love of the game and the competition. Let's talk about the guys who got sacks on Sunday and what to look forward to in week 2.
Another CFL guy too. It's a CFL sponsored show, I think, tonight. So I think one of the tough things about IDP is trying to sort out when there are guys who make a big play or 2 big plays in a game, and it racks up a whole bunch of points. And then you have to figure out if that means that there's somebody that you need to pick up, that you need to use every week, or if it was just this fluky style game. So I wanted to look at all the players who got 2+ sacks in week 1 and try to figure out who's going to be a fluke and who's somebody that we should use in week 2 and beyond. So we'll go with Cameron Wake first. 2.5 sacks against the Browns in his Titans debut. He was tops among all edge rushers in Pro Football Focus pass rushing productivity, among all edge rushers who got more than 4 pass rushing reps. So the problem with him is that he only played 23 total snaps, played 33% of the Titans total. So you basically need to play in a league that not only is sack friendly, but probably also gives points for QB hits, pressures. That's where you need to be for Cameron Wake to be really useful. Otherwise, he's going to be extremely boom bust. Never been a big tackle guy, and it looks like he's probably going to play even a little bit less than he used to in Miami. So, I mean, if it is one of those leagues where you get pressure numbers beyond that, he's in play. And, maybe Cameron Wake is a matchup play. going forward. Second-year teammate, by the way, Harold Landry on the other side played 90% of the snaps, but didn't come anywhere near to generating the kind of pressure that Wake did. So we're going to have to see if Harold Landry is going to make himself useful as an IDP. I wasn't really high on him coming in. He wasn't a huge sack guy, was an impressive athlete, but without the big numbers at Boston College. So he's definitely a wait and see overall, even in Dynasty. Leonard Floyd put up 2 sacks against the Packers, of course, in the first game of the week. And he and Dante Fowler are kind of in the same boat where they're both former first-round picks. They both put up 2 sacks in week 1, and they're both coming off low sack seasons. I think they both had 4 or 5 last year. Neither has had a huge sack season yet in his career. I think Leonard Floyd had 8 as a rookie. But I think that they're 2 different guys in terms of outlook from here for me. Floyd, before the season, his position coach said, this is the guy on my team who has the best set of pass rushing tools. And just in case anybody forgot,
right,
this is the team that Khalil Mack plays for as well. So the coach said, right now, Khalil Mack is the better pass rusher, but the guy with the better tools is Leonard Floyd. Now, I'm not going to say that Leonard Floyd has upside beyond Khalil Mack, but if the coach is saying that about him, I'll say that there's a chance that we get an 8 to 10 sack season from Leonard Floyd, maybe even with upside beyond that 10, especially in the situation that he's in. Dante Fowler wasn't a big number guy coming into the league, was never a big number guy in Jacksonville, has done more letting down than he's done producing. So right now I'm going to treat his week 1 as that was a fluke, and he's going to have to show me again before I'm interested in him. Devon Kennard, we've made mention of before, 3 sacks against the Cardinals, 9 total pressures in that game. That's a quarter of his total from last season. He had 36 total pressures, according to Pro Football Focus, all last season. He was playing the same level of playing time last year as he was in week 1 this year. So there's certainly a chance for Kennard, and especially if he gets more of those edge opportunities. But I wouldn't go forward expecting big things from him. I think he opened with about as good a situation as he could have for sack numbers, and he delivered. So, play him in good matchups going forward. We'll see what he does in less good matchups. Quentin Jefferson for the Seahawks also had a strong performance, also put up 2 sacks, played almost exclusively on the right edge for that game. So the question for me is what happens to him and his playing time once Ezekiel Ansah is back, when Jadeveon Clowney is ready for full time, when LJ Collier's back. I mean, we don't have a lot of, I know what this guy's going to do in Seattle on the edge, but we have a lot of bodies and a lot of guys that the Seahawks went out and got pointedly this offseason. So I think Quentin Jefferson's going to be on the edge less, but he also played all over the line over the past 2 years, much more limited snaps. He hasn't been, nearly a full-time guy over that span, but we know that he can play inside. We know that he can play either end spot. So, I mean, he can be one of those players along the lines of Michael Bennett, who just gets his snaps by playing different positions. He's built like a fast defensive tackle, 6'4", 295, runs a slightly below 5-second 40-yard dash. So more like a defensive tackle than an end in that way. So if he can slide in and get some defensive tackle snaps, maybe we'll get numbers from Quentin Jefferson. And then let's wrap it up with T Sizzle, because Terrell Suggs went out to Arizona.
Another ageless wonder.
Exactly. He played 77% of the snaps, which is right at the level where he played for Baltimore. He had a couple sacks in that game. I don't see any reason why he can't continue to be the guy that we've seen him be. We go in every season thinking, all right, well, he's older now. He's probably not going to do it again. And then he does it again. So he's out there. He's across from Chandler Jones. I'm going to go ahead and believe in him.
Absolutely. And he goes back to Baltimore this week. So, wow. And let's go to the third level of the defense, and let's go back to John Norton. And again, looking for some players whose air is pointing up, but also traps that we do not want to get caught in after week 1.
Yeah, man, I think Quentin Jefferson would have a great career if he could play the Bengals every week. All right, so your defensive backs, there was some up and down to kind of get to here. Guys that are looking up, James Bradbury, never been really known as a big play threat. I think he's had, 4 interceptions and 2 sacks in 3 seasons with the team. But the changing defensive scheme, it looks like it might put him in a situation or a position to make some more big plays. Sure worked that way in the first game. He had an interception and a sack and 2 passes defended in week 1. This is a guy that, if you're in a corner required league, he's been a mainstay for us, a solid CB2 with kind of an edge CB1 type guy. If we can start getting some big plays out of him along with the tackles, he could definitely move up the rankings a little bit for us. One guy that kind of caught my eye, Jabril Peppers. He's never really lived up to expectations with Cleveland. And whatever it is about going to New York, whether it's the scheme, whether it's the stat crews that are awarding tackles or whatever, but the guy looked like a different player to me. He stepped right in, and we know he's got the ability, he's got the speed. He's one of those guys that's just a phenomenal athlete. He's a Swiss Army knife, so to speak, at the safety position. Maybe the Giants have figured out how to use him where Cleveland didn't, but he had one of the better games of his career with 6 solo tackles and an assist. Made plays all over the field, made a lot more impact in the game than what the stats even show. I think he is a guy that is definitely in the right spot. It's only one game, and like we always like to say, one game is a fluke, 2 games is a trend, but he's definitely somebody I'm going to keep an eye on this week. He passed the eyeball test for week 1. Von Bell is a guy that we've kind of liked off and on, but he never quite got his opportunity to play full time. It seemed like he was always in a rotational situation there. He finally got an opportunity to play every snap, put up some pretty good numbers for us. Another guy that made a lot of plays in the game. I'm pretty impressed with what I've seen from him so far. If he stays in that full-time role, I think he's going to wind up being a solid starter for us every week. Watching the Packers play in that early game, there's a guy's name that kept coming up that really didn't expect to, and that was Raven Green. He worked mostly as a nickel safety. He was on the field 77% of the times. Quite a bit of the time he played up near the line in kind of that nickel linebacker role. Wound up having a good game for the number of snaps that he had, 5 tackles, an assist, and a pass defended. One note there for the Packers, played a nickel defense of some sort on every play of that game. They never put 2 linebackers on the field together, inside or weak side linebackers. So looks like that's going to be their base defense on most weeks, because they weren't necessarily playing against a big passing team. You know, Chicago is not one of those spread the field. You know, they're not like playing New England where they're going to spread the field out and you want to go with a nickel base all the time. So it kind of looks like with the injury situations and the players that they've got to work with there, the Packers are going to run with that base defense. It would be nice to see Green get on the field 80 or 90% of the time, but you know, if he's going to be productive, relatively productive for us, especially we start getting later in the season when attrition starts taking some guys away and injuries and so forth, we're going to get a little bit deeper. This is a guy we definitely want to keep an eye on. Another guy that impressed me quite a bit was Jordan Whitehead in Tampa Bay. He was a starter last year, kind of quietly stepped into that role, had a really nice first game, led the team with 7 tackles and an assist. You know, it's hard to say what's going to happen there, whether if they're going to start bringing things around a little bit. Tampa seems to always struggle on defense. They can't seem to keep anybody healthy. They've got guys hurt already. They lost Justin Evans to IR. They got the situation going on with Jason Pierre-Paul. So it looks like he's going to have a lot of opportunity in there. Definitely like what I saw from him again. If you're in corner required leagues, the Chargers started Brandon Facyson at corner this week, which kind of a surprise start. And he's not exactly a rookie, but if you look at what he did last year, I think he had 2 tackles and an assist on the season. He didn't get on the field much, so he basically is a rookie, inexperienced player, gets out there. And we talk about this every year early in the season. You know, having a rookie at starting corner is kind of like throwing chum to the Sharks. The offensive coordinators are going to target him. They're going to throw at him. They're going to test him. And they did exactly that in week 1. He wound up with 7 tackles, 2 assists. If he continues to start, you could wind up seeing numbers similar to those on a pretty regular basis. There's some guys that put up some real big numbers this week that I you know, don't be an ambulance chaser, don't get caught in the safety trap. Jeff Heath and Xavier Woods combined for 16 solo tackles and 4 assists between them. And you know, kind of like Jefferson with the Bengals, if they could play New York every week where they throw 15 times to the tight ends, those guys might continue to have pretty good numbers. You know, they're going to be decent for us. Jefferson or Heath is going to be a guy that is going to be a marginal third starter or decent depth for us. I would not expect a whole lot of consistency out of Xavier Woods. He may have a big game here or there, but he's probably going to turn back into a pumpkin after week one. I would not go out and jump out and pick him up. Another guy that's kind of in that same boat, Tracy Walker. He was a beneficiary of the game flow. He did play very well. I was impressed with his playing skill and getting up on making tackles. He was aggressive. He did a lot of things well. But the fact of the matter is he's starting off 15 yards off the ball just about every snap. And sooner or later, that's going to make it hard for him to get in on some plays. The flow of that game and the offensive game plan of Arizona kind of fed right into him. They were hitting those intermediate passes or throwing to the middle of the field. He was coming up and make a lot of tackles on those. And I don't think that's going to be something that's going to be sustainable either. Jonathan Abram injury, that was a big one for the Raiders. This is a kid that was going to be special. He's going to still be special. He's just not going to be special this year anymore. Went on IR today with the torn rotator cuff. Curtis Riley's the next man up at the safety position there. But I would expect that they're going to have to alter that scheme a little bit because Riley could definitely not cover the ground that Abram did, and he's just not that player. So we're going to definitely see some change there going into week 2.
Speaking of change, well, we're good for the last take, and the matchups will be back. The Gurus matchups will be back, but intellectual honesty. Hey, we don't have enough to go on yet, and we're not going to try to say we know before we know. We need more data points, and Matt, speaking of that, we maybe need some more data points, but we do have to stick our neck out and make moves after week 1. But going back over those defensive backs, how do you sort out some of the guys to wait and see on versus guys that you need to grab right now?
So we're all fantasy guys here. Who are you kidding saying we don't know anything?
We do everything on incomplete information, but we posture like we know. Yeah,
it's all small.
It's in the job description.
Pretending like we know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So yeah, there. Like I said with the sack guys, I mean, there's always big numbers, and we always have to sort through it and see who's worth picking up and who we should wait and see on. I certainly got some of the DBs down that John already mentioned. Jordan Whitehead, I'm on board with that one. Not a special player, I don't think, but in a productive spot. He's at the back of a Buccaneers defense that has been bottom 4 in completion rate allowed each of the past 2 years. So there will be opportunities. We've seen Bucs safeties give us numbers. Chris Conte, Bradley McDougald before he went to Seattle. And Jordan Whitehead shouldn't have to worry about coming off the field once Justin Evans is ready because Jordan Whitehead's a strong safety. Justin Evans is the free safety. So they should fit together nicely. Another one that I'm going to go ahead and pick up is Juan Thornhill. He didn't put up big numbers in week 1, but he put up solid numbers, 8 total tackles, 5 of those solo. I've been wondering if he was going to start for them right away. It seemed like that was likely, but the whole preseason, it was Daniel Sorensen who was listed on the depth chart as the starter in that spot at safety. Sorensen started all 3 of the, preseason games that matter for our purposes in most cases. And Sorensen looked like I shouldn't say looked like. So he started through the preseason, wondered if he was going to be the starter. He was not the starter. He only played 12 snaps in the opener. It was Juan Thornhill in the lineup. Thornhill, the rookie, second-round pick, did play 100% of the snaps. He did not do anything of particular note beyond the solid tackle numbers, but he was a big number guy in college. 13 interceptions, 26 passes defensed over his 3 starting seasons, 98 total tackles as a senior. So he's capable of collecting those numbers in a spot where we've had some guys collect numbers before. Like I said, a second-round pick, Louis Riddick on ESPN raved about him either right before he was picked or as the Chiefs picked him. I don't remember. I remember that Louis Riddick was a fan of him, and I respect what Louis Riddick has to say about players. On the wait-and-see side, Anthony Harris in Minnesota, I'm interested. 5 tackles, 2 interceptions against the Falcons, so you can't really wait and see. If you want to take a shot on him, you're going to have to go ahead and add him. But he was at least part of the reason that the Vikings let Andrew Sendejo walk after last season. Sendejo leaves behind a position where he averaged 5.6 tackles per game over his 3 basically full seasons of starting, which is not terrific, but it's a decent base to build off of. And Anthony Harris might have more going for him in coverage. He did enter the starting lineup last year, right around midseason when Sendejo went down with his latest injury. Mediocre tackle numbers there, but 6 passes defensed. Of course, had the 2 picks against the Falcons, was the NFC Defensive Player of the Week for week 1. So like I said, you're going to have to make a move if you want to take a shot on him, was Pro Football Focus's 5th graded safety overall for last season, was strong across the board in every category. So I would not be surprised if he starts to put up numbers. Did also have an 8 interception season way back in college. He's been in the league this is his 5th year now. So I don't know how much the college stuff matters for him, but if we're looking back for a guy who hasn't played a whole lot, at least it's something. I'm also not interested in Xavier Woods, like John mentioned. 11 tackles. He averaged 4 total tackles per game last year as a full-time starter. So I think week 1 was a fluke, or at least until the next time that he plays against the Giants and we get, 17 completions to the middle of the field, then maybe Xavier Woods will be interesting again. Tracy Walker, 9 solos and a pick against the Cardinals. That game is going to give us a lot of things that are going to look like they might be signals, and they don't end up being a whole lot, because the Cardinals ran 82 plays. The teams went to overtime. Both teams ran 80-plus offensive plays. We can't get much from the volume of those numbers in that game. We're going to have to wait and see on a lot of those guys. Quentin Dunbar, Quentin Dunbar might be somebody who's owned in pretty much all of the leagues of people who are listening to this, because if you're listening to the IDP Roundtable, you're probably a pretty sharp IDP player. But I had him ranked toward the top of our cornerbacks heading into the season. He is low owned, it seems, from what I can tell. He was a tackle monster last year, had his playing time limited by the calf injury that was nagging, and eventually ended his season early, but was on pace for huge numbers. And he started out the way he did there. 9 tackles against the Eagles in week 1, 8 solos. He's not a special cover guy, which is exactly what we want, is somebody on the field who's going to allow completions and then tackle a guy. He'll have some pass breakups along the way. He had a large number of those last year as well. Quentin Dunbar off to a strong start, and I think that he's somebody who should be owned not only in cornerback required leagues, but I think he's starter worthy anywhere where you start 2+ defensive backs.
The IDP Roundtable off to a strong start this year. Again, with the help from Matt Schauf from DraftStarks, SCHAUF. Follow him, get the IDP hits and so much more. The Guru, John Norton, you know him. You subscribe, Eyes of the Guru, and all the other great IDP team members at footballguys.com. Got you covered. And it's great. Breaking new ground with the IDP Roundtable, and join us on Wednesday nights around 9:30 Eastern if you want to catch the video version to see us in our dark lairs. And learn a little more about the faces behind the voices. Thank you, everybody. Always, you're the best. IDP Fantasy Football, the only real fantasy football, and always the classiest fantasy football. And then
I'm with you.